Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back into the podcast. Yet another episode of Crushing Fantasy Football. I am Bryce Lockridge, your host of the show. Guys, today I'm going to be talking to you guys about how to draft an elite fantasy team for the 2022 fantasy football season. And I'm going to get right into it with the first step on my list, and that is to draft a ridiculous amount of depth at the running back and wide receiver position. Now, the reason I say this is because you look at your lineup every single year, and if you look at your lineup on draft day, and then you look at your lineup at the end of the season, it is enormously different than it was at the beginning of the season. A lot of times, over 50% of your team is different than it was on draft day. So no matter how good your starting players are, the fact of the matter is some of them are going to get hurt and some of them are going to underperform. And you're going to want to have backups that can come in and give you production when your players get injured or when they're not doing as well as you thought they were, because this is how you win at fantasy football, guys. Depth is everything. You're going to end up having a way different lineup at the end of the season than you did at the beginning of the season. So you want to have depth at the running back and wide receiver position, and you pretty much want to be adding depth in rounds 5 through 14. You know, you get your 2 starting running backs, your 2 starting wide receivers, or 3 running backs and 1 wide receiver with your first 4 picks. And then after that, you want to continue to bolster the running back and wide receiver position pretty much through the entire draft, despite popular belief. Do not rush to fill out your starting lineup and get your tight end and your quarterback and your defense and your kicker and all that stuff. It is significantly more important to add a ton of depth at the running back and wide receiver position. Now, obviously, somewhere in rounds 5 through 14, you're going to have to draft a tight end and a quarterback. But outside of those 2 picks, you should be using all of these picks to bolster your wide receiver and running back position. That way, you're never left completely being stuck at any point in the season with a player that's not going to give you any production. So make sure to draft for depth. Next on my list is you want to go heavy running back early. Now, this is even more important in 2022 because, well, the running back position is very scarce. After David Montgomery and Ezekiel Elliott go off the board at the end of the 3rd round, there's really no good running backs left. So considering the fact that you can wait and there's awesome wide receiver depth all the way through pretty much the entire draft, the entire 16 rounds this year, there is wide receiver depth. But after the 3rd round, there's no running back depth left. So you need to be drafting running backs early. It is extremely important to use 2 out of your first 3 picks on running backs or all 3 of your first round picks on running backs this year because of the scarcity at the running back position and the fact that we are ridiculously deep at wide receiver and you can get awesome league-winning wide receivers after the 10th round. Next on my list is you want to have extra depth at the wide receiver position. And a big reason for this is because due to the scarcity at the running back position, I have a feeling that a lot of teams this year are going to end up playing 3 wide receivers as opposed to 3 running backs. Now, I always advise to play 3 running backs and play a running back at your flex if you can, because this is what's usually going to give you the maximum amount of points. But the fact of the matter is, considering how deep we are at wide receiver and considering how shallow we are at running back, I think that almost all of the really good teams this year, especially in deeper leagues, are going to be playing a wide receiver at their flex position. So it is extra important this year to bolster your wide receiver position, especially in the later rounds, and get those high upside wide receivers, because you're probably going to end up playing 3 wide receivers if you want the maximum amount of points due to how the player pool is set up this year. Next on my list is going to be you want to draft tight ends with high upside in the later rounds. Guys like Zach Ertz and Mike Gesicki. A reason for this is because tight end is a very volatile position as far as getting you points on a week-to-week basis. It's very hard to rely on a tight end for a safe floor, and most tight ends are touchdown dependent. So in the later rounds, you want tight ends that have good big playability and a high weekly ceiling. Zach Ertz and Mike Gesicki are a perfect example of this. They're going up the board after pick number 100, and they're tight ends. They give you high weekly ceilings. They're obviously going to be boom or bust, as pretty much every tight end is in the league with a few exceptions. But the fact is, they have a higher ceiling than most tight ends, and you can take them in the later rounds and not have to invest as much draft capital to get them. Next on my list, as you really want to wait till the 9th round to draft the quarterback. And a big reason for this is, guys, quarterback is not the biggest difference-making position in fantasy football. And people are so excited to draft the high-end quarterbacks, but the fact of the matter is, quarterbacks are not the biggest difference-making players as far as points, because even if you're playing up against a player that got a quarterback in the later rounds, that guy's quarterback can outperform you easily, unlike the running back and wide receiver position where you could have someone dominated at that position if you made a smarter draft pick and got the better player in the early rounds. So wait and draft guys like Trey Lance, Tom Brady, Justin Fields, Kirk Cousins. There are all kinds of good quarterbacks available after pick number 100 in the draft. So wait and draft a quarterback in the 9th round. It's going to benefit you, I promise. Next on my list is you want to draft at least one of the elite handcuffs if you can. Guys like Tony Pollard, A.J. Dillon, Alexander Mattison. All of these guys provide you a massively high ceiling if the running back in front of them goes hurt. Tony Pollard's upside if Zeke gets hurt is the running back 1 in fantasy. Alexander Mattison plays behind a running back in Dalvin Cook that gets hurt every single season. And you know that whenever Alexander Mattison fills in for Dalvin Cook, we've seen it in the past, he usually goes off and gives you one of the best running back performances on the week. And A.J. Dillon already has standalone value in the Packers offense. And if Aaron Jones goes down, A.J. Dillon has very high upside and is a true running back 1 in that Packers offense. So make sure to draft one of the elite handcuffs if you can. Next on my list, final thing I have here is you want to draft wide receivers with high ceilings in the later round. And the reason for this is because wide receivers that go in the later rounds are not going to have a safe floor no matter what. That's why they're going in the later rounds, because they're not getting as many touches as the wide receivers that go in the earlier rounds. But you still have massively high ceiling wide receivers going in the later rounds, guys like Van Jefferson, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Marquette Valdes-Scantling. These are all guys that play in very good offenses. They're field-stretching wide receivers with really good speed, really good big playability, and they could give you a massive performance on any given week. Are they going to be boom or bust? Yes, absolutely. But everyone in the later rounds is going to be boom or bust. That's why they're in the later rounds. So what differentiates a good late-round pick and a bad late-round pick is ultimately the player who has the higher ceiling. Don't go for floor and guaranteed production in the later rounds. Go for that massive ceiling. Don't be afraid to take a shot on guys that have big weekly upside due to their big playability. Guys like Van Jefferson, Marquette Valdes-Scantling, Donovan Peoples-Jones. They all got good quarterbacks throwing on the ball, and they're all wide receivers that are capable of busting out a huge play and winning a week for you. So when you're looking to add wide receiver depth late, make sure to draft for ceiling. All right, guys, I appreciate you tuning into the video. I hope these steps help, and I appreciate you catching the video, and I will talk to you later.